You're listening to the official podcast of the Westside Vineyard in Los Angeles, a community of individuals and families connecting with God to change the world.
But I want to, begin this morning remembering that there's that story of the genie in the bottle who grants a wish. And there's a lot of different versions of that kind of a story. One of them is about three guys who were out on a boat, and their boat sinks, and they are completely lost. And they luckily make their way to an island, and one's an Italian, one's British, and one's American. And they land on this island, and they are there, and time goes on this little island. They've eaten the coconuts. There's not a coconut left, and they are now kind of at their very end, have almost no strength, and there they are lying there on the beach, and they see a bottle wash up, but none of them have the strength to get to it, so they kind of draw straws, and the Italian has to go down and get it. And he kind of comes back, and together they take the cork out, and a genie comes out. And he grants each one of them a wish for whatever they want. And so the Italian goes first, and he's like, I want to once again be on the streets of Rome sipping coffee. He's on the streets of Rome, sitting at a cafe, drinking coffee. And the Brit's like, whoa, I want to be in Piccadilly Square in London, eating fish and chips. And boom, he's there in London. And then he turns to the American, and the American goes, oh, I miss my friends so much, I wish they were here. You've got to think about what you wish for. Didn't go over well with his friends. We need to think about what we ask for. So let me ask you, if you were told, imagine, you could have anything given to you in this life, what would you choose? I know that's kind of a big question, and I know that some of us are tempted. Our common thing is to say, well, what should I choose? But if you can kind of try to get beyond the what I should choose, try to think deeply a little bit about, well, what would I choose? What would my nature jump out to grab hold of? Like, what would I think if something would make a difference in my life, maybe the best difference in my life, what would that be? And as you ponder that, you might recall that there was a life that was given just that opportunity. Some of you may recall. His name is Solomon. And in the life of Solomon, stepping back, the larger picture is that God had been breaking into human life to try to restore all of life, human life, all of creation, back into relationship with himself. So he calls out a people to himself, and in the journey of those people beginning to know who God is, they want a king who would help rule them, and God makes an agreement to have a king, and the first of those kings is King Saul of Israel, of the nation of Israel, followed by King David, and finally, David's life is coming to an end, and his son Solomon becomes king. By now, Israel has become a flourishing, massive nation. It's growing in kind of its wealth and its power, and God's favor has been with them. They've certainly had, though, lots of hardships, too, to navigate, many in the wild land that the ancient East was at the time. And so now you have Solomon in this deeply sober place, and at the very start of this role that he has, he goes out to an altar, and it says that he gave 1,000 offerings, like burnt offerings to God. He is deeply sobered by the position that he's in. And this is where we read that in that night, as he's given all of these offerings, and you can see him deeply feeling like, I need you, God. You can pick up with me, and in 2 Chronicles, one of the historical books, we read, it says, that night God appeared to Solomon and said to him after the offerings, ask for whatever you want me to give you. He's having that moment, kind of that I gave you. Solomon answered, I didn't actually give it to you, I just said it, imagine that somebody said that. But Solomon answered God, you have shown great kindness to David, my father, and have made me king in his place. Now, Lord God, let your promise to my father David be confirmed, for you have made me king over a people who are as numerous as the dust of the earth, which is what God said. Give me wisdom and knowledge, that I may lead this people, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? God said to Solomon, since this is your heart's desire, and you have not asked for wealth, possessions, or honor, nor the death of your enemies, which some of you were thinking about, I know. And since you have not asked for a long life, but for wisdom and knowledge to govern my people, over whom I have made you king, therefore wisdom and knowledge will be given to you. And I will also give you wealth, possessions, and honor, such as no king who was before you ever had, or none after you will have. He asks for wisdom. And I know some of you are going, yeah, but he got all the other stuff thrown in there too, And you think, okay, maybe I'll just ask for the thing, get all of it. But that's just how manipulative we are. But his desire, what God says is your desire, what you identified, what mattered, you understood what matters most is wisdom. And that wisdom would become defining to his leadership and to his whole of his life. And Solomon would move forward and become renowned for being a man of such great wisdom. He is the one who would go forward and build the great first temple of Israel. He built so much of it. He's the one who divided it into the 12 different districts and set it up, and it thrived and came to its golden age. Queen Sheba, who some of you may know, you may remember the story, she comes because she is saying, is this man really so wealthy and wise? Who is he? And I want to know if it's true. She comes to visit, and when she leaves, she says, you are, and says, he is a man of wisdom beyond anything I've known. This is who he's become. And it's profound that he chooses wisdom above all. And in choosing that, he would later, towards the later part of his life, he would then deposit that for us. And he would share about wisdom. And so he wrote 3 of the books he's at least partially writing. The book of Ecclesiastes is part of the wisdom literature of the scriptures. The book, the Song of Solomon, which is part of that. And much of the book of Proverbs, the one that is more well known and read by more, and most people at least know some proverb here or there. The whole book of Proverbs is that which he wrote. And today we're launching into engage wisdom, particularly drawing from the book of Proverbs. And that's what we're going to do throughout this summer. So for these weeks, we're going to engage that. And the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs is really talking about wisdom, why it should be valued. What does the person need to be that is going to grow in wisdom? And today we're going to just look at that part, because then in chapter 10, it begins to talk about specific areas. So it says, how can you be wise in the way that you relate, in the way you speak to people, the way you choose your relationships with people? That's a great aspect. How you choose to engage marriage or family, how you manage life affairs of work or money or all sorts of things. So I'll be sharing most, but actually other parts of the pastoral team are all going to take things they're most connected to, and they have a unique connection and flow for, and they're going to engage those parts over these weeks. So we're going to engage each of these, and Marlo and Joel, and then Kevin Rivas, who's the pastor of Comunidad Viña, our Spanish language congregations, going to share the last week. And then we're going to have them all join us on Labor Day weekend and have Comunidad Viña join us as we have our Labor Day picnic that weekend. So that's quickly a summary, but what I want to do is start off by engaging wisdom, why it is that which seems like a lost value in our culture, and why it is the greatest value. And that's what's being proposed. We find that Solomon's only in his 20s at this point. And now he has this vast empire to rule over. And David was a great warrior, and Solomon was great as well. But you can imagine this is a rather intimidating situation to be in. And so you see that he soberly says, God, I need wisdom. I need wisdom. Now, most translations of this or the parallel passage of this will translate that often as I need an understanding heart or a discerning heart. That begins to tell us something about what wisdom is, because it feels a little wishy-washy, like it's kind of a neat word, but a lot of us, if you're like me, it doesn't grab me. Like I don't feel like I get a handle on wisdom, and I want to help us get a handle and know why it matters and how we can grow. So the first thing we really see in terms of what is wisdom is that wisdom is understanding and discernment that develops within us. That's the broadest sense of it. In Proverbs 1, the opening lines, we read the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, understanding them, for acquiring discipline and prudent life, for doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion or discernment or the ability to make choices out of life to the young. And that central word there is understanding. Like it's different than just having knowledge. You can have facts, but you don't necessarily understand them and have a working knowledge. And that working idea is like, how does it really work is a big part of this. So it involves understanding and that which allows you to actually function in life. Or to put it this way, point two, wisdom is understanding how life is meant to work. This is really the best definition that I think some have come forward with. If you go through all of the wisdom literature, wisdom could be said to be this. Wisdom is knowing how things really are, how things really work, and what I should do about it. That is different than mere knowledge or mere facts. It is that ability to go, oh, I understand it. I understand. I might know some facts, about money, but it doesn't mean I understand how it all works together and how to be a good, form a good business. That's different. That takes me having a working understanding, wisdom to figure out and make those kinds of choices. The truth is, many choices in life are not merely based in facts. They're based in having an ability to understand and discern those facts. And that leads to the next point here, which is that wisdom transcends the limits of knowledge and moral rules. It is the perspective and understanding that guides them. So wisdom is always related, and you'll see it, to knowledge, as David did, or as Solomon did in his words, and to moral rules about doing what's right. It's related to it, but it's never simply that. Wisdom understands that moral rules and knowledge, meaning facts, are like tools. But wisdom is the craft of knowing how to use those tools, knowing how to understand what matters among the many facts, knowing how to apply something in its context. So just to understand, it is helpful towards being people who live a life that's good and right and does what's right. But it takes wisdom, not merely a rule, to do that. So maybe you feel called to help a family in need that's really struggling through a time of poverty in their life. That would be ethical, and any way you do it would at some level be a moral good thing. You'd be following a right rule, a moral rule that you should care for those who have less. But most of us understand the way we go about helping them, some ways are going to prove to be hurtful and some ways to be helpful. So it takes wisdom to know how to live out the moral good of helping someone who's in need. And we could say this about all of the great kind of moral imperatives. It takes wisdom to know how to do that. And the same can be true of knowledge or facts. Wisdom is related to that. We need knowledge. Knowledge is good. We need facts. We need information. But information by itself will not allow us to really have an ability to work life well. There's lots of things for which we have information for which we really don't know what to do with it. And many are describing that we live in a world right now in which we have such an overload of knowledge and such an incredible loss of wisdom. And if there's anything I want to encourage you to stop today and really take in, it's how maybe profoundly true that is and dangerously true it is. We live at a time in which it's unbelievable the level of access we have to information and to, if we might say, knowledge, facts. And I think that we're a people who have such access to information that we really enjoy feeling like, you know what, that's all I need, man. I got it. I got this. I can collect anything. And it really makes me feel like I'm really smart. Like, there's nothing I couldn't answer. I just ask Siri. She tells me. And I really know how to, I just Google it. Life is it's just a matter of being able to get information. And if that's all we need and we want to think it's all we need, then we are really smart people. But we need to really realize how far aflung we are when it comes to knowledge versus wisdom. And just in the last 25, 30 years, it's incredible to ponder how much knowledge has become exponentially overloaded to us, and wisdom is lost. And they really become so clear when we think about that. It was in 1969, I believe, when we did something remarkable. We sent, through technology and knowledge that we had, it was pretty amazing. We sent this piece of metal all the way to that moon that we look up at. That's like mind-blowing if you think about it. Really, it's just, wow, But it's amazing is that we sent humans on that one. Like, that's really amazing. Like, we sent some of us to go up to that moon. What's really amazing is they came back. Like, they lifted off of the moon and had to lift off and come back, and they made it. That's incredible. And the computing power on the ship itself, on that craft, had 64 kilobytes of memory. Your modern toaster had more computing power than that spacecraft. That's how far we've come in that short time that some of us, that's our lifetime. And that's how much exponentially things have changed. The Space Center, the Goddard Space Center, by which was trying to manage and send and have data and connect it to that whole thing. Now, they had the big computer at the times. They had the IBM 360, and that thing was like $3.5 million in the size of a car, and they had multiples of those. And that thing could do thousands of calculations. So it had a lot more power, and that played a big role in being able to do that. And the smartphone in your pocket has 32,000 times faster than that computer. The smartphone in your pocket, they say, can guide 12 million of those ships simultaneously. That's an amazing amount of power we have when it comes to technology and, you might say, access to knowledge. It's unbelievable. That smartphone, if you had a 128 gigabyte smartphone, and I worked this out right, would have, just to put it in perspective, in terms of information you could store on it, let alone going out to the web, the average small town library has 10,000 books. Schools, 12,000. City libraries, 30,000. Your iPhone could carry 380-some thousand on your phone. That's amazing. It's amazing that we have overload of information. And the question is, so what has that done? I mean, the assumption would be if what we need is knowledge, if knowledge is like our Western culture, academic-oriented culture, presumes like, hey, we got knowledge, we are amazing, we're so smart. It begs this question, how can we have, as I think many of us would identify with, so much knowledge about relationships, and yet the tragic number of marriages ending in divorce continues to devastate so many lives. And yet now we're like the masters of relationships. There's 1 million books on relationships. But we don't know how to do them. something is tragically wrong. Despite all our knowledge about the significance of parenting and family and all the study in the last 30 years, when this has risen to its highest, and most of it's been done in the last 30 years, the number of children without a father present in their lives has tripled since 1960. Tripled in the exact same amount of time that we have gained all the knowledge. Despite all the knowledge about sexual diseases, which once gave confidence to a safer future, last 30 years, we know so much now, we'll be able to deal with this. We just had the highest cumulative number of cases of sexual diseases ever recorded. When most said, oh, we're at the end of this, we'll wipe this out. Something went wrong. All that knowledge doesn't seem to be doing it. Despite the increase in knowledge about financial management, we just in 2016 had the highest level of credit card debt in history. Levels that would astound past generations. They would think, you what? We have developed all this wealth and a lot of, you're better off than any of us had? Why are you living with a level of debt that will destroy you? Same time we've gained so much knowledge, we've reached these crisis points. Despite being the most informationally informed people in history, we continue to see forms of violence unfolding in new waves, including by younger and younger lives, including violence to oneself. Just in the last 28 years, the rate of suicide has increased 28%. In the same time, we're gaining all the access to knowledge, overloaded. Something's gone horribly wrong. What does all this tell us? I think it tells us that knowledge is not the end. It's not the ultimate. It's not what we need most. What we need is wisdom. We lack wisdom. We lack the ability to understand the way that life works. And that is a big part of what it is that we need and are desperately after. We don't want to despise knowledge, but it is not actually knowledge that allows us to navigate life well. We need to understand how it works. And the true value, I think, of wisdom has been lost so deeply over the generations. I think that 2 generations ago and further back, especially you go all the way back to antiquity, Socrates and all of kind of the philosophers of the kind of the great classical ages, if you spoke the word of wisdom and you talked of wisdom, their eyes would dance. Their eyes would light up. Wisdom, yes. Let's talk about what? The way life really works. That's what we want to talk about. Not just facts that don't really mean anything. Not about that which can't help me navigate. I want to understand how life works. That's what they would speak of. And that is what's so lost. And part of it is because we've kind of broke out, I think, in the 60s with kind of some healthy rebellion. I actually am part of it, and I think there's a lot of health to it. But it had this idea that everything that was new was improved, new and improved. It was on label on every box, And so everything that was better was new, and everything that was novel. So what is it that we are enamored with today? What's new and novel. That's what it is that we feed off of. And if we're honest, we're all biting a lot on what's new and novel. And we have no wisdom. Because what we find is that wisdom is about understanding what has always been, the way things have always been created to be. So it's not about the new and novel, it's about plummeting the way life was created to be. Wisdom is the unchanging order, that which rightly fits. Wisdom is rooted in the very fabric of reality as it always exists, the way things work together. We listen to the wisdom cry out to us in Proverbs 8. This is wisdom personified crying out. It says, I was appointed from eternity, from the beginning, before the world began, when he gave, speaking of God, the sea its boundary, so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth, speaking in this poetic way of right when things were created, then I was the craftsman at his side. I, wisdom, was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. There is wisdom saying, I am at the core of your existence, of the whole world you live in. And this is profound because throughout most of human history, the ideas about the world we live in, whether they come from almost every cultural background, every racial storyline or cultural storyline, was that the world was created because the gods were having a power struggle. And in some random act or some kind of working out of the power struggle, that's how we came into existence. That's all we are. We're just a random act. And that's still, in a sense, part of the storyline that for many. Or we're just the way that conflict got worked out, and we're just part of that, and that there's no meaning. This is why the sages of Israel are declaring something so profound, because they're saying, no, our whole existence is tied into a God there's joy in the earth, there's order, there's the ability to find peace about how it all works together because God created it with that order. And you and I can come into a place in which life can fit right. We can navigate how it really works. And that is why that's why wisdom calls out. You don't try to look for the new and novel. You look for the way life actually works in all of these ways. And that's why it calls out in that way. And so we find that in every way, the heart of wisdom is calling out and saying, come understand how life really works. How it really works. The best definition, I think I passed over, is that really wisdom is about knowing and understanding what really is, the way things really are, how they actually work, and how I then can make a difference with them. How do I engage them? That's what we all need more of. And pure facts will not answer so much of the questions of life. We need wisdom to do that. So if I asked you, how do we answer the common questions that we go through? The truth is, there's lots of ones we can identify, like, okay, who should I marry? What job should I have? Should I leave this relationship? Should I move from this place? Should I confront this conflict I'm having? Or should I let it go? All of those kinds of questions cannot be answered merely by a moral rule, nor by merely facts. How do you navigate? How do you work through those big decisions? It's wisdom is what you're going to need. It's the principles that can guide you through them. That is what we really need to go forward in life. And many of us, we're not even aware of how many things choices we're making. In other words, if wisdom is about knowing what really matters, how do you even know that you got up today and are even applying your time to anything worthwhile? Or yesterday, or tomorrow, or what you're going to do this afternoon? In other words, we don't think of those as choices, but we're living in choice. We are always making a choice about what we do and how we do it. We just don't consider it a choice because we just take it for granted. We might be all like on the wrong ladder, like climbing up a ladder that isn't even like going to matter. Who knows? How do you know what matters, and how do you know how to take all the complex information and have clarity through it? That's wisdom. It is what allows us to do well in life, to flourish in life. So how is it that we can develop wisdom? Well, let me just close with these points. One is, and there's so much to be said, because I hope you'll read through some of Proverbs and the first 9 chapters maybe this week, but to kind of follow up, because we're going to start into some topics in it in the weeks to come. But one is just understanding how valuable it is. I think wisdom begins by saying, okay, I am a creature of knowledge. I know how to do knowledge. Knowledge hasn't really made me able to succeed in and of itself. I need wisdom, and really understanding that and being passionate for it and wanting to defy the way this world kind of wants to just sleep in its knowledge or think that it's kind of got it all together because of knowledge. And to understand wisdom. Listen to the words of Proverbs 8, 10, 11. It says, choose my instruction, instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold, for wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. He's calling out and saying this is more worth everything that you would consider to be of the greatest value, the greatest treasure. He's saying wisdom is worth more than all of that. Why? Because at the end of the day, those things are really reflective of your circumstances, and none of us can define or dictate all of our circumstances. But while you can't control that, success in life will always be how we are doing life in whatever circumstances we are in. And so wisdom is essential because it's the part of life that really helps you to flourish in whatever context you're in. So he's saying this is what is so great. It's the value worth gaining most. You can't Google it, though. You cannot just Google your way into wisdom. It takes more, and that leads to the next point, that we need to understand that wisdom develops as a path in life, as we form patterns in life. One of the key things you hear about wisdom over and over is that it's really related to this idea of life being a path. We read in Proverbs 3:6, in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make what? Your paths straight. And over 700-800 times in the scriptures it speaks of life as a path. What does that mean that it's a path? Well, I think among other things, the use of that metaphor tells us that life is not merely a moment or a destination. Life is so much about the way that we walk. And the way we walk is step by step. It's the way we navigate each day and each choice. Who you become in all of the little choices of life. It's the way that you choose to treat somebody tomorrow morning. It's the way that you decide what you're going to do this afternoon. Each of those choices begins to form a pattern. It's a reflection of what you think matters and how you think you should relate to people and things. And that is getting worked out in every step in life. So wisdom is not described as a door. It doesn't say, join the door of wisdom, find the key, and when you open the door, you got it. No, that is not the way wisdom is described. It's described as a path in which you and I start to exercise these things, and they become something that grows in us, develops in us as we mature. That's why often people see wisdom as related to those who are older. But as we're going to note, it really begins when we're younger in how we look towards wisdom, how we value it, what we're willing to do to develop it. But it grows over time. And it's something that we need to cultivate in that way. And what we'll find is that we have to adopt certain practices then in the way that we live and the way we develop over time. So we might be able to gain a piece of wisdom or a wisdom statement as a truth, and it's really just a piece of knowledge initially, but it becomes wisdom as it grows in practice. So one piece of wisdom, and I think we might look at this, is the idea that you should listen to all sides before you make a judgment on something. Anyone ever heard that? It's kind of part of God's wisdom about the way life works. Anyone ever not done it and paid the price for it? I have. So let's just take that. So let's say that's a truth. Now, are you wise because you heard that? Not yet. It's just knowledge at the first point. I mean, it begins as a wise statement. How do you do it? Well, the first time you do it, you might struggle and go, okay, I tried this time to listen because I realized I needed to do that. And I tried to hear both sides before I rushed in and thought I understood everything. And that really helped me. The first time you do it, you're not necessarily wise, you're just trying to apply something. But as you do it more and more times, what's happening? You're becoming the wise person who lives in that. It becomes part of who you are. And so that's the way we need to understand this idea that we grow in these truths. So we're going to be looking at these truths, and we're hoping to begin to grow in them. And lastly, we form the foundations of wisdom, meaning there are some things that are just so core to having even the general perspective that allows us to become people who see the larger truth and can begin to understand life. What does it take to understand life clearly? Well, there's a number of foundations that we could look at, and they are strewn through the book of Proverbs, especially the first 9 chapters, some of the things that a wise person will do in their life. But there are 2 that stand out that are most formative. The number 1 is know God, and make that the most foundational thing that you can do. And we see this Proverbs 1:7, the next verse from where we began reading. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline." And here he's not speaking of saying you need to fear God in the sense that we think of when we're saying we fear someone because they want to do us harm. It's not that kind of fear. You should fear people who can do you harm. But this means fear in terms of you understand this is the unchanging reality. It's God. So you should have the desire to build your whole life around that. It should matter most. This is the unchanging one. You might want it to change, but God's sovereignty is what will rule life. So fear that above all. Or another way to put it is, you might think, but I really want everything to revolve around me. That's fine. It doesn't. It just doesn't. So when you understand that it does not, where does it revolve around? Is there a will? Is there a purpose? Is there an intent? Is there one who comes before everything we know? Yes, I believe that is God. And therefore, I'm going to join his gravitational pull because he is the center. And if I come outside of that gravitational pull, I am in the outer darkness. So I am realizing I'm going to fear him. He is the center out of which I build my life. And what we begin to see is how significant that is to the human soul. Listen to Proverbs 3, where the wisdom again cries out, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity." Then listen to this. "Let love and faithfulness never leave you." How significant? "Bind them around your neck." Make it so like there's no way that you escape them because they are so much connected to you. Write them on the tablet of your heart. The heart is deemed not just the feelings in you, but like the disposition, your whole inner being out of which you live. Let them become written on that. Written. They cannot be erased. They are written on that tablet. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. What I want you to grasp there is that he's saying that the beginning of really getting everything else right, the beginning, if you want to understand the way things are, how they work, and how to work with them, know that God is the center of all those things. But particularly he says what? What is it that you need to have most deeply rooted? Love and faithfulness of God. And that word love, they're similar words, but the word for love is chesed. It means that kind of industrial strength love that you cannot change. And that's why it's very parallel to the word faithfulness. So God's industrial love, unchanging, unconditional, nothing can overcome it love. Root yourself so deeply in that, and you will be able to live in wisdom. That's the beginning of wisdom. Let it be that which centers you and calms you. How do you do that? Well, he's saying, you don't just sit there and go, "Oh yeah, I read about it. I put it on a plaque in my house." That's a good start. But most of us would say, "I believe God exists and I believe he loves me." I do. I think there's a creator of the universe, and I think there's love I think he in somehow is connected to love, because it just seems like there's a source of love behind everything. And you stop right there, it will not affect you. If you just leave it out there as kind of a proposition, what is he saying? You will have to deeply root yourself in this. You will have to make this the thing that you value most, rooting yourself in. I don't know about you, but when I got up this morning, I'm thinking, coffee. Yeah, you said it. I am. I'm thinking, I really need coffee. That's like I don't know how to get going here until I get that coffee. And I'm just, a few of you know what I mean. And you're thinking, you know what I need to realize is I don't have a chance if I don't understand that God loves me deeply and that I am rooted in that love more than anything else. It settles so much, it keeps me from kind of running off in all the desperate, destructive ways of life. It calms me, it centers me. I need to get in touch with the point where it is like waking up and realizing I need to have coffee, I need to be rooted in God. It's like oxygen. If you are under the water and you're running out of oxygen, you feel what? Your whole body is desperate. What? To get to the surface. To get what? Oxygen. Air. I need air. And everything in my being is going to fight for it. That's what we need to feel about God's love. It's there, but are we really breathing it in, letting our whole soul, in the way that our body needs to get that air? Are we breathing in into our souls the love of God? If we're going to do that, we need to make effort. We need to make it a discipline. We need to take time. We need to make reflection. We need to read the scriptures. We need to pray. We need to take time to stay centered in that. And secondly, and it kind of connects to it, we need to know not just God, we need to know ourselves. Notice that he goes on and says, and lean not on your own understanding, and realize that you're not that wise. You know, like you don't have it all together. Here's the irony as you read through the Proverbs and everything that's said about wisdom. The wise person knows that they're a fool. That's the paradox. The only wise person knows that at some level on their own, left to their own, they are foolish. That's the beginning of becoming wise, is to know your limitations, your flaws, that you don't know everything, and that a lot of your perspective without kind of God's understanding of the way things are will be like just operating out of your own insecurities. And so we do all sorts of destructive stuff. We hurt people that we don't want to hurt. We get insecure. We try to defend things we shouldn't defend. We don't do things we should do because we're afraid. All sorts of, when you don't know God loves you and you think that you're wise, it just doesn't go well. Now, the hard thing is, it's if self-examination and being willing to say, I got things I do that aren't very wise. I have some patterns in my life that aren't very healthy. You know, I kind of fear people in this way. I kind of, get mad at people this way. And, if I don't have God to center me in that, I will not want to go and look at myself. Self-examination is not a pleasant thing sometimes. You have to have a level of security to be able to do that. And I think most of us, we avoid it, honestly. We don't want to look at those things. In fact, I think that it's very hard psychologically to be really honest people with ourselves unless we believe that we are deeply loved by God. So you kind of have to have both of these together. When you know that you're rooted in God's love, you're able to look at your own humanity as having not clarity at this point, and that's the beginning of journey into wisdom. And we can overcome some of those things and see what God tells us about the way we're operating and what we really need to know. But we have to become absolutely, acutely, intimately aware of our limitations, our weaknesses, our foolishness. We're foolish. We all have some things we do that are very foolish, and you can decide to be the person who just keeps doing the same things. And most of us have some things that we keep doing. Just ask your friends. And they'll say, yeah, you have a few things that I've watched you do for a long time. How are we going to overcome that and become wise and work life better? Let God be rooted in God's love and be willing to know yourself. And what we find, and I'll close with this, is that it's hard to want to do that. That's why I think we avoid wisdom. That's why I like knowledge. Knowledge never makes, knowledge just makes me feel smart. It does. I know some more facts. How do you not feel good about it? Doesn't mean that I'm living well, though. If I have to look at how I'm living in those patterns, some things are pretty off. So why would I want to look at those patterns? Well, that's why wisdom says it's not easy. You've got to choose it. That's why wisdom cries out for you and I, get this, seek wisdom above all. That's why wisdom it's always spoken of as crying out to you and I. It's like behind all of creation, there's a cry going on, would you come and enter into the depths and knowledge of the way the world really is? And that's why it's personified. And in Proverbs, you get this where it says, I, speaking of wisdom, I cry out. And it often says, my son, do this. Why is it saying, my son? Why is it personifying this? Well, one, it's good poetry, and there's a poetic element. Another reason is because many believe that the parts of the book of Proverbs were written as kind of a manual for young boys in particular, it was trying to help raise them into becoming wise and having some understanding of life. So it may have literally been speaking to my sons. But this personification, ultimately, there's more to it than mere poetry. It is a call to enter into a love affair with the true and living God. It is God who's behind this. That wisdom is the nature of God, and it is calling out, saying, come to me. Seek me. I want you to enter into the way I want life to be. A parent who understands the way life is, and they want so deeply for their children to understand some truths that will really help them, feels passionate. How much more the creator of the universe who's looking at us, potentially destroying our lives, and is saying, please come. I call you. I beckon you. Seek wisdom, not knowledge alone, not mere facts at least. Seek wisdom. Seek wisdom above all, and ultimately know that this is personal. This is God seeking you out, not merely some abstract idea of wisdom. This is the living God behind creation saying, come and understand life. And what we ultimately discover is that actually that part of us that says, oh, that it could be so personal, it did become personal. That actually the very wisdom of life, the one who's from the beginning, ends up incarnated into human life. That is who Jesus is. He's the one who personifies it. And so in the old traditions, you can find where some of the old writings are saying, come and find the way of life that fits well. But Jesus said what? All of you who were weary and heavy laden, meaning you're weary because you're trying to work life and it's not always working. Come to me and I will give you rest. My yoke, and he's speaking there of the bridle over the oxen, my yoke is easy and well-fitting is what the words mean. Meaning if you're trying as an oxen to kind of walk and flow as you walk and do your job in life and it doesn't fit, it's going to be painful and hard and laborious. Well-fitting yoke means it fits, it flows, it's the way it was meant to be. Come to me, Jesus says, my yoke is easy, it fits well. And you're going to find rest for what? Your souls. Your soul will be at rest if you do life the way it was meant to be, if you understand these eternal principles. And Jesus says, I am the one who ultimately fulfills them. Every other person or sage of wisdom would always say, here's the way, follow that way. Jesus said, I am that way. I am the one who you can personally come to. And here's what's quite amazing, is the life that I'm hoping for you, the life that would give you life if you would follow it, I fulfilled it. I came in perfect obedience, in perfect relationship to the way life was. I'm the human who was also divine, who fulfilled that. So you could have life. So let my life come into you. Invite me to live in you and through you, and I will help guide you by my Spirit in the way of wisdom. And that is his invitation to us. Let's pray.
Thank you for listening to the official broadcast of the Westside Vineyard in Los Angeles. Tune in for next week's message.